Now, mathematics is crucial to protecting our democracy, but it can come up in some unforeseen ways. Now, gerrymandering used to be something reserved for high school government classes or just a political science problem. Now, it's a nationwide issue. My name is Ananya Shah, and I'm a Carnegie Young Leaders Fellow. And for the past 3 years, alongside a team of students that I met at the Institute for Mathematics and Democracy, we've been using math to understand one of the most complex and misunderstood threats to American democracy. That's gerrymandering. Gerrymandering doesn't change how people vote, it changes how their voices are represented. And the most simple way to represent gerrymandering is by packing communities or by cracking communities in order to enhance or dilute their vote. Right now, we're in the midst of a gerrymandering Cold War. States are redistricting not because of population changes, not because there's a new census to account for, but because there's power that's up for grabs. Let's look at North Carolina as an example. There was a court-ordered map that produced a 7-7 Republican to Democrat split. Then a Republican-led commission produced a map that's a 10-4 Republican-Democrat split. Now they want to redistrict again for an 11-3 split, and that's all in the span of 3 years. The same thing is happening in Texas and in California. This is redistricting as a political arms race with no end in sight. Let's see if we can identify gerrymandering. The main way to identify gerrymandering is to look at the shape of a congressional district. Is it convoluted? Does it somewhat resemble a salamander? If so, something must be wrong. So let's play a little game. Is it gerrymandered or is it not gerrymandered? Let's look at Pennsylvania's 7th Congressional District from 2018. What do we think? Gerrymandered or not gerrymandered? Gerrymandered? Okay. You're right. This is the infamous goofy-kicking Donald Duck district. This was later struck down by the state Supreme Court as a partisan gerrymander. Now let's go on to another one. This is Illinois' 4th Congressional District from 2023. What do we think? Gerrymandered or not gerrymandered? Gerrymandered. Gerrymandered. Ooh, so this district, as weird as it might look, actually connects 2 Latino communities together. Now, if this was a gerrymandered district and you just struck it down, well, you're actually diluting the voices of Latino population in the Chicago area. So now it's much harder for their voices to be represented in politics. It's okay, you still have one more shot. So we have the North Carolina district from 2023. We think gerrymandered or not gerrymandered? Not gerrymandered? Wrong again. This is a gerrymandered district. This is actually packing Democratic votes into a single congressional district. Actually, one more. Do you think this new Kentucky district? No, this is actually a segment of an ink blot test. That's not even a district at all. So what this goes to show is that shape is a terrible detector for gerrymandering. I mean, geography is naturally irregular. You have coastlines that are jagged, you have mountains that can split across communities, rivers that are curved. So instead of looking at shapes, I look at votes. Now, to do that, I use persistent homology, which is a tool from topological data analysis. Topology is the study of holes. You might have heard the joke that a topologist can't tell the difference between a donut and a coffee cup. That's because they have the same amount of holes. However, there's a difference in the amount of holes that a donut has and that a sphere has, and topology is able to capture that difference. This is where the politics actually comes in handy. There's a political phenomenon known as the blue island in the sea of red. The idea that cities tend to vote democratically and surrounded by generally Republican voting areas. So, when you look at Democratic voting areas across a state, they show up as islands. Topologically speaking, these are holes. I convert this voting data into a topological space for analysis using methods in Feng and Porter's 2019 paper. So I analyze these holes on both the precinct level and on the district level. I look at precincts because they're the smallest subsection of election data attainable. That means they're too small and too granular to be gerrymandered. I then compare them to the district pattern. If you have a representative map, areas that vote democratically on the precinct level will be represented on the district level. If a map has been cracked, you're not going to see votes on the district level when they should be there on the precinct level. Those holes will disappear. If precincts have been artificially packed into fewer districts, on the district level, you see a lot of Democratic vote share that's not represented on the precinct level. To objectify the difference between precinct and district level voting patterns to understand how gerrymandered something is, I calculate the bottleneck distance. This tells you mathematically how many transformations is needed to map the precinct level voting pattern to the district level voting pattern. Let's look at a couple of examples. So here we see Texas. In the 2024 district boundaries, you can actually see the districts connecting Austin and San Antonio are connected into one district, surrounded by a very thin line that's running along the interstate. Even though on the precinct level, these are two separate areas. This is an instance of packing. On the 2025 map, we can see there are less features overall that vote democratically, even though I'm using the same voting data here. Looking at the bottom, those are persistence barcodes. These tell you every area that votes democratically and how much they vote democratically. The longer the line, the more democratic vote shift it has. You can see in the 2025 map, there are less features, even though we're looking at the same amount of data. Now, if we look at the bottleneck distance, in 2024, the bottleneck distance between precinct and district level voting patterns was 8.0. In 2025, using the same data, it's 12. People are not voting differently. Their voices have been changed and their voices have been diluted just because of the way someone drew a line. Now, the Texas 2025 map was proposed under the pretext of removing coalition districts. These are districts in which two or more minority groups constitute a majority of that district, and they're not legal under the Voting Rights Act, not protected under the Voting Rights Act. And so when I analyze Black and Hispanic voters alongside voting data, I find that they're being packed into fewer districts. Another way to analyze attempted racial gerrymandering is to look at the amount of precincts split across multiple districts. This is because voting lines and districts are generated using precinct-level voting data, but if you wanted to use racial-level voting data, you have to use census block data. And so what you often see is that precincts are split across multiple districts because census blocks are very tiny and they don't fit very nicely into precincts. The 2024 map had 0 split precincts, looking at a 1 hectare overlap space. The 2025 map had 380 split precincts, which is an indication that racial data could have been used in the generation of this map. California tells the opposite story. We have Republican voters being cracked and Democratic votes being packed. Gerrymandering is bipartisan, but the strength of this metric is that the math doesn't care who is drawing the lines. It just cares that votes are being diluted. Let's put the math into some real human terms. Now, in Texas, the 2024 map, there are around 500,000 votes being diluted. The 2025 map, around 750,000 votes were being diluted. That's almost as much as a single congressional district, just because someone drew a line. Now, I'm not old enough to vote yet, but when the time comes for me to walk into that voting booth for the very first time, I want the assurance that my voice is being represented. The assurance that the district around me was not drawn to muffle the voice of my community or to muffle my voice before I even had the chance to use it. 84% of voters across party lines say fair district maps are critical to a healthy democracy. Now, this type of agreement is almost unheard of right now, which tells us gerrymandering is an issue about everyone. It's not just reserved for one party. Now, the math can't fix gerrymandering by itself. We still need independent redistricting commissions. We need legislative reform. We need courts that are willing to act. But now, for the first time, we have an objective measure, an objective, defensible measure of when the votes and when the lines have been drawn to deceive. Right now, when the lines have been drawn to deceive, we are not waiting for permission to fix the democracy that we are about to inherit. Thank you.